Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Break. It's Steve Barrett here, the editorial director of PR Week, and here with another show. Delighted to welcome Helena Mouse to the show, who's CEO of Archeype. And 2 years, 2 months in the job, Helena. So great to have you on the show and find out how it's all going. Welcome to Coffee Break.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm delighted to be here with you. Yeah, I mean, what a 2 years to be in in a new role. It's been quite an amazing experience in many ways. You know, we had our sort of
that's really.
Yeah, it's like all standard stuff. No, you know, look, we started Archeype 2 years ago, almost to the day, in March 2 years ago. So we recently celebrated our 2-year anniversary, and it was sort of an amazing experience to talk about all of the things that we've done over the last 24 months. And it's really mind-boggling when you step back and look at it. But it has been a really interesting time to start a new company, and I feel actually really grateful for the timing of all of this. If something as disruptive and, you know, frightening as this was going to happen, you know, the timing for us ended up being good, if there is such a thing, because we had a year together to really get to know each other and to really build a lot of trust and to get really clear on our ambition to build the Archeype for the global agency of the future. And then we had this crazy.
This will be the only time I mention it, but obviously that was formed out of Byte and Text 100, which we've already forgotten about as brands, haven't we? As I noted before the interview, but just that was what happened to you.
That's right.
Brought those together, and you took over as CEO. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So we merged those two agencies together, and we took that opportunity to say, if you're going to launch a global agency today, what does it look like? And we tried to take the strengths of those two agencies, and then add on our own feeling about what the market was really looking for at this moment in time. Yeah. So we had this kind of year together of like building trust, getting real clarity on this vision of being the Archeype for the global agency of the future, and what does that look like? And then we had a year of pressure testing a lot of those ideas. And we really, you know, we talk about ourselves as a startup at scale, because, you know, we have hundreds of people in 20 offices around the world, but we behave more like a startup, you know, in how nimble we are, in how flexible we try to be. We really have a growth mindset about things. So we like to test and learn. And I mean, boy, we tested a lot of things this last year. We pressure tested a lot of our ideas.
You talk about what the agency, the client wants, the modern agency. What would define that? And you've always had a tech bent, if you like, being part of Next 15, being based out on the West Coast, and obviously your tentacles stretch further than that. But you've always been from that tech culture. So what is the agency of the future looking like?
Yeah, I mean, tech is definitely the red thread that runs through the work that we do. Whether or not all of the brands that we work with you would think of as tech brands is a different question, I think. But what, you know, part of what we built Archeype on was this idea of, you know, in a world in which every company is a tech company, how do we operate? And we think there are just some really fundamental things on the historic global agency model that needed to be modernized. And a lot of it was just philosophical, you know, and how we behave. And we have seen a pretty big shift from sort of the giant global remits of, you know, kind of 10, 15 years ago toward a more sort of best of breed in every market in which I operate sort of perspective from the client base, which we think is dead right. You know, they deserve to have people in every market in which they operate who are very finely tuned to that market. And so we structured the company to really respond to that, and to be very like consultative as opposed to arms and legs. So we have a very senior team relative to our size. And we're really clear, you know, our portfolio we're so proud of. We work with some of the most interesting companies in the world, and we are 100% clear that our success is entirely based on their success. So we're going to do all of the right things to align what we do with helping to drive their business forward, as opposed to helping to drive our business forward.
How does that reflect how tech PR has changed? Because I'm thinking, looking back, that maybe it was more boots on the ground, you know, getting media relations coverage, being out there talking to the tech journalism space, which seems to have changed as well. So speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, from when I started on the agency side, I had been in-house for many years, and I joined the team at Outcast. I had been their client, and what an absolutely stellar team to join. And I
And the
learned so
office
much in that
in
experience.
the Next 15 firm, of course. Yeah, well known.
Exactly, sister
Working with
agency.
Facebook and the likes of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I got to work with incredible companies during that time, and learn from really the best of the best. The founders, Margaret and Karen of Outcast, are absolutely incredible. So I think so much has changed since then. But I think the good news is that when you're in kind of the tech space, that is your life. It's constant change. It's very rapid iteration on things, and that's what we're seeing, absolutely. And I think we're moving to a world in which actually it used to be very sort of like, what is the vehicle that we're going to use to tell our story? And that might have been kind of tech publications. We've moved, I think, away from that to being more vehicle agnostic, and really much more focused on what is the business problem that we're trying to solve, and what is the right vehicle to use to get that story to the people who matter most. We have a lot of companies that come to us and say, our number one goal is to attract tech talent. That is the problem that a lot of technology companies are facing. Everybody wants to hire the best developers in the world, and so how can we help them reach that audience and tell those stories? And it's not in the traditional way. That is not the Wall Street Journal. It doesn't necessarily help you to reach that audience. So I think we like to say that we are vehicle agnostic, and it's really about telling great stories in the places where the audience exists.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Margaret Wenmakers, because she's now
Yes.
at Andreessen Horowitz, of course, a big VC company in the Valley.
Yeah.
And they've made a big move into becoming a sort of a media owner themselves, and cutting
Yes.
out the fourth estate. And you
Yeah.
almost sense a little bit of tension between the tech world and the media, the mainstream media. Why
Yeah.
has that come about, and what is that a positive thing? Or because it seems a bit, if you listen on Clubhouse sometimes and other places
Yeah.
like that, there's a definite tension there, isn't it? And
Yeah.
Andreessen seems to have made that switch to say, right, we're going to go direct to the stakeholders and cut out the
Yeah.
media.
Yeah, and look, one of the things that is so brilliant about Margaret is that she understands, what a business needs in order to be successful so clearly, and that she doesn't, use the same cards for every trick that she plays, and that's just part of her genius, I would say. I think is not inaccurate to say that the sort of honeymoon period, as it were, between technology companies and the media is over. And I think that's right. And I think that's fair. And I think, the giant tech companies should be held to account. I think that's very healthy. And I think journalists do an incredibly important job. And they will always be an absolutely critical part of telling the stories about what's happening in the world, both societally and financially. So I think that there is not a world that I would hope to see that would cut that out, because it's such an important part of the story. It's just not the entire story, and I do think that, this trend towards companies telling their own stories is very healthy, because this is what they hope to project onto the world. And it is interesting as a consumer of that information to understand what the company wants you to know about them. But it is also equally interesting to sort of check some of those things, and to be really honest, and hold people accountable.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And it's probably the topic for a whole other show. That
Yeah.
dynamic. But you're right, and the companies being their own media owners is the O in the peso, isn't it? Paid, earned, shared, owned.
Exactly.
Part of the mix, and
Exactly.
we've been talking about
Exactly.
it for a long time, and there's room
Yeah.
for all of it. It's an interesting dynamic at the moment in the Valley. Tell us a bit
Yeah.
about the sort of last 12 months, particularly with COVID, with working
Yeah.
from home.
Yeah.
How have you supported your staff, your teams? How have you kept everyone working
Yeah.
effectively, and how's the industry stepped up?
Yeah, I mean, it has been absolutely a fascinating year for us. And I think a lot of the things that were inside of our vision for the agency of the future, we ended up leapfrogging to those in a lot of ways. So we had talked about this idea of a remote for first workforce, and how that was an inevitability for agencies. We just didn't know it was going to be here, 11 months later. And so we took this giant leap forward to that. And I think also, the way that we communicate as teams, we are very Slack reliant at Archeype, proudly so. They're also a wonderful client for us. And that sort of attitude about like, hey, the future is here before we expected it. And also we already have this amazing tool that allows a lightness of touch around communication and immediacy that it doesn't feel that distance is really shrinks when you use something like Slack. And so as I said earlier, I think we were bizarrely like ready for this without knowing it. And also our culture, which is one of transparency, which we're really proud of, served us very, very well during this period, right? Because we needed to explain to people what was going on. It was a time of uncertainty and doubt, and people were afraid. And so part of what we needed to do is shift some sense of control back onto people by giving them access to the information that we had, so that they understood, what we were doing and how we were responding. And our team has proven to be incredibly resilient. One of our values is kindness, and we really saw people demonstrate that in spades. They lifted each other up. They took good care of each other. They took good care of their clients. And we also learned, that there were some kind of fallacies in our thinking, just as kind of a modern working society, that there's this thing called work-life balance, as if you have two different lives, as if you have a work life and a home life. Well, as it turns out, it was always the same life, but now the kind of veil has been lifted. And we have to be really attuned to that and very sympathetic to people's individual circumstance. And so again, these were all places that we wanted to get to, and here we are all of a sudden. I think the other important thing that we are crystal clear on is that mental health is an absolutely critical issue. And there is something about agency life where there is this pressure that we put on ourselves, right? Because we want to be so responsive to clients and we want to help them to be successful. And people work really hard in our industry. That's just a reality. And we need to take these conversations kind of into a more public forum about how are we taking care of our mental health, and how are we taking care of each other. And I'm proud of the steps that we've made around that area. Again, really suddenly, it was absolutely became critical, virtually overnight, that we start talking about these issues. And I'm very proud to see how, our team has responded to that.
Especially with women in the workforce, we've been doing a lot on that in our Femme Forward series and the pressures they're facing. I know you've got a dual deck arrangement there with the schooling.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, my kids are in school right now downstairs from me. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge. You have to be. I try to model for the people on my teams that that's okay. If the kids come up to me in the middle of a call and say, Mom, what's for lunch? I turn and answer them, and I ask everyone else to wait a second, while I speak with them. And I think that's really important to model that behavior, because the truth of the matter is this is a job. And your life is your life, and you need to lead with that. And so my kids are everything to me. And if they want to know what's for lunch, I'm going to take a second to talk to them about that. And this is for me real progress in my own attitude about it, because when I was a new mom, I worked really hard to not show my kids, to not talk about my kids. I thought it would make me lesser if people understood that being a mom was important to me. And what an amazing lesson that I have learned over the last few years around that. And so I try to be really, really open with other people and to set that example so that they know that we love that, we love that you're a new dad, or we love that you got a new puppy. Bring your whole self, and you will be accepted here, and we will make space for you.
Yeah, I think that's, going out as far up as CEOs of big corporations, because they're doing their town halls now from their homes. And I think they've kind of enjoyed it. They got closer to their people, even if they've got hundreds of thousands of people around the world. So you're right. Totally. And I think the West Coast students are ahead of the game. We're ahead of the game on sort of remote working and work-life balance. I remember my time on the West Coast, and you kind of start early, and because of New York time, and you maybe finish early, especially on a Friday. So I guess you will. And with Slack as a client, obviously you've got the perfect model there. But listen, it's great to find out how you've been doing, Helena, and congrats on the 2-year milestone and getting through it unscathed. And look to see look forward to seeing how you do moving forwards and plotting the progress of Archeype.
That's so kind, Steve. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me. It's been great.